is certainly one major sustainability, but sustainability also covers social sustainability, economic sustainability, and cultural sustainability more so. And I would like to just underline that economic, they at see, if we talk about rural women or small scale level uh, developmental and economic activities, it is not relevant. But the global level big economic activities today are the major concern for this climate change, global warming, and all kind of environmental deteriorations. And there is a global pressure that we have to shift our developmental pathway, economic pathway from which will be dominated with green economy and green energy and all those things. So here it is largely going to be a emerging conflict between economic pathway and environmental sustainability. And I think it will require a lot of intellectual input and policy shift. And we all have to be ready for these kind of situations. Culturally, I think culture also play a very significant role in all developmental processes. And we have to, women, in addition to whatever additional she has required to make efforts from the external world, like individual, like a human being, she has also required to fight herself, like every male or every other person is fighting from their ego, from their internal, say, classes, internal conflicts, and all that. So this inner and outer, the basically the struggle with the outer world and inner world as a woman and as a human being is always required, and it is required for all. So we have to for inviting me, and I must congratulate you all for the role. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your very kind and motivational words.
Now I shall leave the program. Kindly excuse me because I have to go to.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, that you have taken some time out from your busy schedule. Thank you. And now, once again, I invite the Director of Webinar, Professor Preeti Misra ma'am, for presenting a formal introduction of our chief guest, Professor Rakesh Chandra ji, who is a very respected and learned professor at Department of Philosophy, University of Lucknow, Lucknow.
Thank you, Rashida. Once again, very, very good morning to all of you, and welcome to this national webinar of on this International Women Day 2022. I have the great pleasure and pride in introducing our chief guest today of this national webinar. He is very learned. As I told you, he is a voracious reader, because in all his lectures that I have listened, he quotes a lot many books, and we do feel complex that how he finds time for reading so much. So he's a voracious reader. He is an academician of international repute, honorable professor, Professor Rakesh Chandra ji. For the very first time, I met him when I was doing my dissertation of LLM on the domestic violence. And since then, I have found him very, very simple, very, very soft spoken, and humanistic at heart, which is a real characteristic of a human being. I also had the opportunity of listening to mesmerizing lectures of Professor Chandra on many seminars, conferences, and workshops, especially on the issues of gender. And what I have felt that all the time he has left his audiences spellbound with a lucid style of speaking and attractive style of presentation. I am sure that you all will have the same feeling after listening to him. Though it's a sheer pleasure listening him offline personally, but because of this crisis, we have to be content with his lecture on this digital platform only. So Professor Rakesh Chandra has been the head Department of Philosophy, University of Lucknow, Director, Institute for Women Studies, Dean, Student Welfare, Director, Cultural Activities, and member, Indian Council of Philosophical Research. He has been a consultant with UNICEF on primary education and child labor. He has been recipient of UGC and ICPR scholarships and has been co-investigator of one UGC major project on pluralism. He has actively supported gender-specific programs of UNDP, SIDA, ACE, and Oxfam in India and Nepal. He has prepared the country report on gender for DFID titled Challenges and Milestone Women Empowerment in India. He has also co-authored the UNDP Gender Report for Uttar Pradesh. He has prepared the Gender Development Index with a special reference to quality of life under the Center of Excellence scheme in 2009. He has worked with Dalit communities on girls' education and Panchayati Raj in Barabanki district of Uttar Pradesh for over a decade. He has trained primary school teachers in 28 districts and prepared training modules for joyful learning. He is on the board of Seva, Beti Foundation, and Suraksha, and has actively supported Mahila Samakhya. He has been nominated as one of the 5 representatives of UNICEF for the He for She campaign. Sir, here I would like to request you to illuminate our audience regarding this campaign of He for She. Professor Chandra's areas of philosophical interest are philosophical logic, epistemology, analytic philosophy, feminism, and human rights. He has published several articles, book reviews, and a book. He has conducted a large number of refresher courses, workshops, and seminars at ICPR Lucknow Center and UGC Academic Staff College. He has also directed UGC special lectures at several universities. So his biodata is very, very rich, very, very long, but due to that of time, I am reading just the highlights of it. So on behalf of all the participants of this national webinar, on behalf of the university fraternity, on behalf of our own Department of Human Rights, on behalf of all the faculty members, I'm not taking the names, and organizing committee members and all the participants, I welcome you, sir, on this digital platform and would request you to enlighten our audience with your exposition. So thank you so much, sir, for honoring our words, for coming here by taking out some of your precious time from your busy schedule and gracing this national webinar. So I welcome once again and invite you for your exposition, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's my honor and pleasure to join the national webinar on the questions of women empowerment and sustainable development. I would like to thank the Vice-Chancellor and the coordinator, Preeti ji, also Professor, who introduced the theme, especially with reference to women's relationship to nature, on which I'm stimulated to say something. Everybody says that it's a formality every time to say that you have taken time today, but today really, I'm sorry, we really are very tight. We have many programs today. So I would just take a very short time to express some of my views with all of you, share with you some of my views on 2 themes. And I think I'll divide my time between 2 things. One, I talk about primarily looking at the question of women's empowerment and development indicators. And the second, which I was stimulated by my previous speaker, especially talking about women's nature and relationship to nature. Because that's one area which I find a little tricky about nature's nature and women's nature, a certain kind of a warning that we all need to have about essentialism. So, as Preeti ji said, मुझे इस बात की बहुत खुशी होती है कि मुझे ये मौका मिला कि मैं जमीन पर भी बहुत सारा काम करूं और बहुत सारे लोग हिंदुस्तान और नेपाल में उनके साथ काम करने का मौका मिला, महिलाओं के साथ, बच्चों के साथ। और मुझे इस बात का भी बहुत खुशी होती है कि मुझे नीति बनाने का भी मौका मिला, तो चाहे वो प्राथमिक शिक्षा की नीति हो या महिला नीति हो, और अनेक प्रकार के लोगों से, डेमोक्रेटिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से हिंदुस्तान में नेपाल के साथ काम करने का मौका मिला। कई बार जब हम नीति बना रहे होते हैं तो लगता है ये कभी जमीन तक पहुंचेगी या नहीं, और कभी जब जमीन पे काम कर रहे होते हैं तो ऐसा लगता है कि ये जमीनी हकीकत क्या कभी नीति में जाएगी या नहीं। but I feel extremely fortunate that I have been able to do that. Also, I straddle two very difficult things. One of the most ancient subjects of the world, philosophy, is what I teach. And one of the most modern disciplines in the social sciences, women's studies, is something which I also teach and read and study. So between my activism and my academic world, between an ancient subject and a modern discipline, I have a very difficult life. And also, as this question, what is a philosopher doing in social sciences? What is a man doing in women's studies? I remember somebody interviewed me when I joined as the director of Institute for Women's Studies. The two people who congratulated me, one was Saida Hamid and the other was Professor Mohini Giri. And they said that finally we can be confident that, men can take over issues like that. And at one time I got a little irritated also by so many questions to me, including the Indian Express asking me questions, how do men handle women's studies? I said, fisheries department are not headed by fish. So why should women's studies be only confined to women? The question is, it's an academic discipline which is studying questions of theory, of practice, of women in health, of women in philosophy and everything. It is a pure academic. And as an activist, I am committed to the ideas of democracy. And that is why I take the cause of women and children and all marginalized people as my own. But I think we will have occasion to talk about it in a more personal forum. As I said, that in the next 15 minutes, I think I would try and see, first of all, try to again say something to all of us, which I think we all know, but needs to be said again and again. And that is that how do we define empowerment? And how do we talk about empowerment, especially with relationship to women? So when we talk about empowerment, sometimes it is defined as a control over material resources, intellectual resources, and also ideology. Secondly, it is said to have to involve power with, power over, and power within. And many people think that actually when we talk about empowerment, it's a process of awareness, of conscientization, of capacity building, leading to greater participation, larger decision-making power, and control, leading to transformative action. So it involves the ability to get what one wants and also to influence other people about our concerns. Especially when we talk about women's empowerment, then we have to look at many things. One, recognizing, as we are in an academic institution, recognizing the contribution of women to knowledge, helping them fight their fears and sense of inadequacy, enhancing their self-respect and dignity, controlling your own body, controlling resources like land and property, reducing the burden of work, creating and strengthening sisterhood, and also in general, promoting the spirit of care, nurturance, gentleness, sustainability for everyone. So this is very important for us to understand as far as our understanding of empowerment is concerned. We also know that the talk of empowerment is critical to the talk of human rights. You are a Department of Human Rights, and we have this kind of a discussion that, how do human rights and empowerment go together? And what is the kind of approach that we take to development? Earlier, we had one approach, and then you have a human rights approach to development. And then subsequently, we have a capability theory approach to human development. Is the capability theory understanding of development contrary to the right-based approach, or can they go hand in hand? Are questions which I think all of us need to address very seriously. You were mentioning conferences and discussions of the UN and also the He for She campaign. I remember that, one of the very important conferences that we all know, and especially all of you keep on referring to, is the Cairo Conference. And this was the Cairo Conference on population in 1994. And when we were looking at it, it was looking at population and development. And it said that, one of the most central features of development that we need to address is the question of gender empowerment measure. And the gender empowerment measure, or the GEM, focuses on 3 variables. It looks at participation of women in society especially in political power, in decision making, in education and health. And from 1995 onwards, you all know that the UNDP report is devoted to women empowerment, and it declared that if human development is not engendered, it is endangered. And a declaration which almost became a leitmotif, वो एक तरीके का निशानदेही करने लगा सारे आगे के development को. And so we kept on saying that if you're looking at development and looking at measuring of development and policy planning, equality, sustainability, empowerment, and women's emancipation will be very, very crucial. And it was very well understood that actually women empowerment and emancipation of women does not depend upon national income. कि आप ये कहेंगे नहीं पैसा होगा तब करेंगे. It depends upon an engaged political process. There are still big countries in the Middle East which have all the money, but which do not have freedom for its people, especially for women. Drawing upon the work of Amartya Sen on human capability, much has happened, especially this idea, as you all know, since you are students of philosophy and jurisprudence and human rights, you know that the idea has been drawn from Aristotle, and a new matrix was created to measure human development, especially 2000 onwards. This is what has been happening. The emphasis was that we need to enhance human well-being or human flourishing, as they said. We just do not look at only national income as the goal. So GNP, GDP, per capita income, per capita saving is not the important point. There are other things as well. And especially the question of people's choices have to be enlarged, and which means that there must be more economic opportunities to make use of their capabilities. States and countries will be considered developed in terms of how much space do they create for their people to develop their capabilities, how long, healthy, painless life are people able to lead, how much are they educated, how are they knowledgeable, do they enjoy a decent standard of living. And this initiative behind the capability theory had a twofold, had been twofold. Especially, we know that these things became very important in many articles by Martha Nussbaum and subsequently by Sabina El-Kire and the others. First, again, the assumption. What is the assumption? The assumption is that all human beings have certain capabilities. Not only do we have needs, but we have a certain way of fulfilling our needs. आदमी को भी भूख लगती है, जानवर को भी भूख लगती है. आप कुत्ते के सामने रोटी फेंक देते हैं, पर इंसान के सामने अगर आप रोटी फेंकते हैं तो उसको महसूस होता है कि भूख तो मिट रही है, पर मेरी इंसानी खुसूसियत, बजाते इंसान जो मेरी इज्जत है, उसका यहाँ पर सम्मान नहीं किया जा रहा है. So we not only have needs, but we have a human way of satisfying them. It's not just a crude animal way. The list of capabilities, of course, you know, Sen said that I'm not going to give a list of capabilities. People have to develop their own. But Martha Nussbaum has been more upfront. And when we look at it, there is a lot of discussion. We don't have time for it, but I'll just quickly run through the 10 capabilities that she's talking about. Life, being able to live to the end of human life of normal length, not dying prematurely or before one's life is so reduced as to be not worth living. कि कभी आपको लगने लगा कि जिंदगी इतनी अजाब हो गई, मुझे इतना अपमान मिल रहा है, मेरे साथ इतनी तकलीफ दी जा रही है मुझे कि मैं इससे तो अपनी जिंदगी खत्म ही करूं. The second is bodily health, being able to have good health, including reproductive health, to be adequately nourished, to have adequate shelter. Third, bodily integrity, being able to move freely from place to place, to be secure against violent assault, including sexual assault and domestic violence, having opportunities for sexual satisfaction and for choice in matters of reproduction. कि मैं आजादी से घूम सकूं, जा सकूं, बगैर इस बात के कि कोई मुझे घूर रहा है, कोई मुझे देख रहा है, कोई मुझे ग्रोप करेगा, और मैं अपना पार्टनर, सेक्सुअल पार्टनर इंक्लूडेड, खुद अपने आप चुन सकूं. Senses, which is again very, very important, very, very significant, hardly discussed in the past. Imagination and thought, being able to use the senses, to imagine, to think, to reason in a truly human way, including but not limited to literacy. कि मैं अपनी संवेदनाओं को, अपने संवेदना की जो मेरी क्षमताएं हैं, सूंघने की, देखने की, छूने की, इन सब का इस्तेमाल कर सकूं, केवल पढ़ना लिखना नहीं. Being able to use my mind and imagination. protected by freedom of expression. हम लोग काम करते थे महिलाओं को के साथ, तो हम लोगों ने बच्चियों से बात करी, औरतों से कहा कि तुम लोग कभी खेलती थी, तो उन्होंने कहा नहीं, हम लोग को खेलने की इजाजत नहीं थी। क्या तुम पैर फैलाकर, हाथ फैलाकर खड़ी हो सकती हो? औरतों को पैर फैलाकर खड़े होने की इजाजत नहीं थी, सिर उठाकर खेलने की इजाजत, पेड़ पर चढ़ने की इजाजत नहीं थी, छोटे कपड़े पहनने की इजाजत नहीं। So all these kinds, and this is the kind of a global experiment. Emotions, being able to have attachments, to love, to grieve, to experience longing, gratitude, justified anger, not having one's emotional development blighted by fear and anxiety. कि हमारी जिंदगानी ऐसी हो कि हम किसी से रिश्ता कायम कर सकें, मोहब्बत कर सकें, कोई जब हमारा दिल तोड़ दे या हमारे साथ कोई दुखी की बात हो तो हम उसके ऊपर अफसोस कर सकें, रो सकें, चीख सकें। किसी के प्रति अगर हम आभार अभिव्यक्त करना चाहते हैं तो अभिव्यक्त कर सकें, हमारी भावनात्मक विकास हो सके और वो केवल भय और आशंका से दबा हुआ ना हो। Practical reason, being able to form a conception of good and engage in critical reflection about planning one's life, protected by the liberty of God. मैं अपनी जिंदगी के निर्णय, अपनी जिंदगी के goals खुद तय कर सकूं। And then very interestingly, affiliation, being able to live with and towards others, दूसरों के साथ, दूसरों के लिए जी पाने की सलाहियत मुझ में है और उस सलाहियत का इस्तेमाल करने का मुझे मौका मिलना चाहिए। So, and in this, it's very important, जो आज मैं सुबह भी बात कर रहा था, that it should be possible for us, for me to live both in justice and in friendship, कि मैं न्याय के साथ भी जी सकूं और दोस्ती के साथ भी जी सकूं। तो मोहब्बत, पोषण, केयर, दोस्ती, ये सब न्याय के विरुद्ध नहीं है। न्याय और इन दोनों को साथ लेके चल सकते हैं। So this would entail a freedom of assembly, free speech, having social basis for self-respect, non-humiliation, being protected against discrimination on the basis of race, caste, sex, sexual orientation, religion, caste, religion, ये सारी चीजें। And then of course, दूसरी जातियों से भी हमारा संबंध हो सके, जानवर को भी हम प्यार कर सकें, पेड़ को भी प्यार कर सकें। And then she talks about play, being able to laugh, play and enjoy. आप सबको याद है, खासतौर से लड़कियों को याद होगा कि स्कूलों में उनसे कितनी बार ये कहा जाता था, जोर जोर से दांत दिखाकर मत हंसो। लड़कियां अपने मुंह पे हाथ रखकर चलती करती। Good girls don't laugh loud. खेलने की भी तमाम। And then control over one environment, both physical as well as political environment. So politically being able to participate effectively in the political choices that govern one's life, having the right for political participation, protection of free speech and association, and also material controls, being able to hold property, to seek employment. आपको याद है, हिंदू अनडिवाइडेड फैमिली में पहले औरत का हक नहीं होता था, दुख्तरी में 1/6 की बात होती है, तमाम तरीके की बातें। So an equal basis of having freedom from unwarranted search and seizure, in work being able to work as a human being, exercising practical reason and entering into meaningful relationship of mutual recognition. Now, these 10 capabilities, which are variously described with refinement in many of the works done by Martha Nussbaum and subsequently discussed also very much by Sabina El-Khairi, etc. These capabilities cover both what, since you are the human rights people, you know, they cover the first generation rights, the political and civil liberties, as well as the second generation rights, which were generally called the economic and the social rights. So it has to be emphasized that all over the world, women have been short-shrifted and have not found support for their central human functions. Women are capable of these functions if they are given sufficient nutrition, education, and other support. क्योंकि अब ये कहते हैं कि नहीं वुमेन की चॉइस है, वो चाहे तो खाए, चाहे तो ना खाए, चाहे तो सती हो जाए, चाहे तो ना हो, चाहे तो घूंघट पहने, चाहे तो ना पहने. But this all we know in the whole question of utilitarian theory are called adapted preferences. जो आपसे पूरा दुनिया कह रही है वो आप मान लेते हैं कि यही मेरी चॉइस है, यही मेरी अस्मिता है, यही मेरी पहचान है, मैं एक बेहतरीन औरत हूँ क्योंकि मैं ये एक बेहतरीन माँ हूँ, इत्यादि इत्यादि. And that is what I'm going to talk about in the next 5 minutes, after 5 minutes. औरतों को हम लोगों ने, like, and I think is one big thing which has been challenged, is that we largely have not treated them as subjects. और इसके बारे में भी लेकिन कुछ डिबेट होता रहता है कि कुछ लोगों ने कहा कि नहीं, औरतें सब्जेक्ट होती हैं, हाँ, वो सब्जेक्ट में हो ढोके के कैसे चुनती हैं, इसको लोगों ने रिकॉग्नाइज किया। और ये बात गायत्री चक्रवर्ती वगैरह कहती हैं कि बाहर के लोगों ने फिर हिंदुस्तान की और यहाँ की औरतों के बारे में कहा कि इन लोगों को सब लोग जो है वो दबा के रखते हैं, या तो ये सती हो जाती हैं, या तो ये प्रोस्टिट्यूट हो जाती हैं, या तो ये बुर्के में रहती हैं, या तो ये घूंघट में रहती हैं, और या तो ये देवदासियां होती हैं। तो ये जो ईस्टर्न वुमन अपने आप में का जो पोर्ट्रेयल है वो भी अपने आप में एक प्रॉब्लम है, क्योंकि सब्जेक्टहुड औरतों को नहीं मिलता, ये एक सवाल है। और ये कि किसी औरत ने सब्जेक्टहुड का एक्सरसाइज नहीं किया, ये दूसरा सवाल है। अपने अपने तरीके से औरतें इंडिविजुअली और कलेक्टिवली सब्जेक्टहुड का इस्तेमाल करती रही हैं, हमेशा से करती रही हैं। बौद्ध भिक्षुणियां भी थेरी गाथा में कर रही थी, और भी तमाम औरतों का जिनको आप देखते हैं कि माइथोलॉजी में, महाभारत की कहानियों में, कि कैसे सत्यवती ये चुनती है कि नहीं नहीं मैं खुद चुनूंगी। और सत्यवती कौन है? एक दलित स्त्री है, मत्स्यगंधा, जिसके बदन में से मछली की खुशबू आती, और वही महाभारत की सबसे केंद्रीय स्त्री है, द्रौपदी से भी ज्यादा फंडामेंटल, क्योंकि अगर सत्यवती ना होती तो भीष्म ना होते तो वो पूरी कहानी ना होती। सो वेदर इट्स माइथोलॉजी एंड द अदर, दीज आर द वेज इन व्हिच पीपल आर been reconsidering those things, and many people are saying कि आपने पूरे ईस्टर्न वुमन को भी एक तरीके से कर दिया, that's also a problem. But nonetheless, women are certainly, we know that their subjecthood is largely taken away. Women are as capable as men for exercising will, controlling desire, taking decisions, but social institutions have generally not supported, and women are excluded as the other. Women are often treated as not as ends in themselves, let's say the Kantian framework, persons with dignity who deserve respect from laws and institutions. और आपको पता है कि कांट जो सबसे बड़े चैंपियन थे ह्यूमन राइट्स के, जो ये बात बार बार कह रहे थे, कहते हैं nobody should be treated as a means to an end but an end in himself. उन्होंने भी औरतों को active citizenry नहीं दी थी, which is in fact very tragic. I feel very, very disappointed in him. But and so women are constantly being treated instrumentally as reproducers, mothers हैं, प्रकृति का ध्यान रखने वाली हैं, caregivers हैं, sexual receivers हैं, agents of family prosperity हैं. Sustainability में भी ये कहा जा रहा है कि औरतें क्योंकि माँ हैं, बच्चों की देखभाल करती हैं, इसलिए वो पेड़ लगाने के लिए ज्यादा अच्छी हैं. Please, please, please think about it. So Human Development Reports since 1999 demonstrate that practically no country in the world treats its women as well as men according to the measures of life expectancy, wealth, and education. And developing countries, like the rest of them, in that perhaps the problems are more urgent, where caste and class also result in acute failure of human capabilities of women. Women in this part of Southeast Asia lack essential support for fully functioning human life. And within the country, there are many issues to be addressed closely. And we are living in Uttar Pradesh, which is at the bottom. HDI में भी हम बॉटम पे हैं, GDI में भी हम बॉटम पे हैं, GEM की तो बात थी, आप छोड़ दीजिए, वो बहुत ही दूर की बात होगी. मैं अब 5 मिनट या 6 मिनट के लिए थोड़ी सी कोशिश करूंगा कि जो बात मुझसे पहले वाले स्पीकर्स ने दोनों कही, उनके संदर्भ में उन्होंने बिल्कुल सही बात कही थी, लेकिन मैं उनके संदर्भ में एक वार्निंग के तौर पर ये बात कहना चाहता हूँ. हाउ डू वी नीड टू अवॉइड एसेंशियलिज्म, स्पेशली. And I wish to interrogate the idea of both nature and women as we discuss the question of environment, the right to negotiate. Especially, I wish to question the idea that women's nature and their special relationship to environment, कि औरतें जो जंगल है औरत का मायका होता है. I have some difficulty with that. Story that women's nature are meant to praise and valorize, कि वो दुर्गा हैं, they are the destroyer of evil, they are the one who have the natural propensity for forbearance and therefore they are best suited, like Gandhi ji said, for ahimsa. औरतों में धीरज होता है, इस वजह से वो लोग अहिंसा करने के लिए ज्यादा बेहतर है. औरतों में धीरज होता है या औरत धीरज धरने के लिए मजबूर होती है?
सर आई थिंक होता भी है और शायद कभी मजबूर भी होती होंगी.
So this I find a little problematic, and equally problematic has been the old stories which we find in Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that there is a difference of character and education for Émile and Sophie. And equally risky is the path which I find has become very popular since 1985 after Carol Gilligan started talking about care ethics. So there are false myths about women's nature, function, features of women, that their participation in society, that distort the women's view and men about themselves. Interestingly, as we survey literature in science, anthropology, history, philosophy, there have been very different kind of stereotypes of women in different cultures. Women claim equality in every sphere, greater recognition of their work and great participation in the workforce, unfounded generalizations about women's nature and destruction of powerful forces of state and oppose social change, and use arguments for limited engagement based upon biological inherent difference कि औरतें ऐसी होती हैं, इस वजह से उनको यही काम करना था. Despite the myth of meritocracy in Western industrial society, it is usually stratified with largely middle class men holding powers and privilege. वो लोग सब meritocracy कहते हैं, पर आप पूरे यूरोप में, पूरे अमेरिका में देखिए किस तरह से आदमी ही आदमी पावर को लिए हुए. They often analyze social hierarchy in terms of examining difference in relative abilities of groups in terms of biology. So there is a biological determinism in large parts of West culture. They is also race की एक भी बूंद अगर Negro blood होगा तो वो किसी काबिल नहीं होगा, उसमें value नहीं होगी. Class, caste, sex, इस हमने our culture में की history में पढ़ी है. A generalized description of women and her nature also is one of the problems. When people speak of middle class white women, working class black women, Dalit Stree, slave woman, there's stories of mother courage. There is Toni Morrison's protagonist. Mahashweta Devi has descriptions of I remember some years back, the Prime Minister's mission came to me and they said, we want to meet Muslim women. And so I said, they are not Muslim women. Women, some of them are careers, some of them are managers, some of them are motivators. They are women who happen to be Muslim. Some of them are trying to get out of the clutches of the clerics. Some of them are wanting to get out of the Ocean family. Many of them are wanting to get out of the restrictions, including the niqab. So they are not this one homogeneous category like Muslim, the such a committee report. So a huge amount of issues within internal differences of people. Now, somehow they all evoke the capacity of women to bear children. Usually it is her passive, so either it is Toni Morrison or it is Mahashweta or everybody, that women are passive, nurturing capacity, which is underlined. And this, I think, that is one big problem of incarcerating women in motherhood and domestic.
I think there is some network issue.
Yeah, network. Let me call him.
Yes, ma'am. Even the voice of sir was also cracking time before. There was some network issue. These all are the demerits of virtual work. It cannot be at parallel to this.
Can we go with the other speakers also?
I think ma'am is calling. Should I call the next speaker, ma'am?
एक मिनट कंफर्म कर लें, एक मिनट.
Okay. I think Saxena ma'am was saying because everybody is having back-to-back program today.
I was just trying to mentioning the names of our own faculty members, Dr. Sangeeta Saxena, Dr. Sunita Misra madam also, that किस तरीके से अपने टेरेस गार्डन उन्होंने टेरेस पे गार्डन बना के कल एक अवार्ड भी लिया है और
Yes, ma'am. Very beautiful.
डॉक्टर द्विवेदी का तो पूरा घर ही इनका पर्यावरण में अंदर है, बहुत अच्छा सा किस तरीके से उसको मैनेज करती हैं. सो अभी मैं कह रही थी that the panel which has been here for debating the issue is a rainbow panel.
Right now.
They are having their self experiences, different experiences. किस तरीके से वो अपनी चीजों को देखकर, and being women and horticulturist and agriculturist, this is a beautiful combination. और जैसा कि अभी हमारे चीफ गेस्ट साहब कह रहे थे कि फिशरीज का डिपार्टमेंट जो है फिश हेड नहीं करती है, तो मैं डॉक्टर दत्ता वेंकटेश दत्ता के लिए भी कहना चाहूंगी एनवायरमेंट साइंस से हैं, लेकिन एनवायरमेंट के साथ रह के वो समझ सकते हैं कि क्या रोल हो सकता है महिलाओं का और किस तरीके से वो आगे आ सकती हैं, क्योंकि जरूरी नहीं है, पर्यावरण तो हम सभी के लिए है, महिलाओं के लिए भी पुरुषों के लिए भी, लेकिन उनका क्या रोल रहा है इस बीच में ये भी देखना बहुत आवश्यक है.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, there is also a crisis to acknowledge the role of women.
Yes.
So you're very rightly
तो
saying that.
मेरा कहने का मतलब ये नहीं था कि वो हमारा मायका है. That was a statement of the particular lady who did that. किंकरी देवी एंड गौरा देवी का जो केस था. अमृता देवी तो 1730 में उन्होंने शुरू कर दी थी, 3 बेटियों के साथ पेड़ों से चिपक कर उन्हें कहा नहीं काटने देंगे पेड़. तो शुरुआत से ही है, चाहे हमारा कल्चरल ट्रेडिशन रहा हो, आज भी हम सब पूजा पाठ तो करते ही हैं, किसी ना किसी तरीके से हम अपने पेड़ों की पौधों की जो हमारे वाटर बेसिस हैं उनकी भी हम पूजा करते हैं. छठ पूजा क्या है, तो ऑल दीज थिंग्स दिस इज इन आवर कल्चर बेसिकली. और उससे हम अपने आप को अलग नहीं कर सकते हैं, उसी में रहते हुए बस ये है दैट पार्टिसिपेशन एंड डिसीजन मेकिंग पावर, whether that is with the women or not, this is the main thing for empowering the women. So empowerment is related to women, and empowered women can empower the women again.
सर से बात हुई है, हानि सर से बात हुई है, सर ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं.
Okay.
So because this is on the YouTube, so that's why I'm just filling the gap, nothing else.
नहीं मैम,
नहीं, वेंकटेश को बुलाने का मेरा भी पर्पस था कि इन्वायरमेंटलिस्ट हैं तो सस्टेनेबिलिटी ज्यादातर जब भी हम लोग पढ़ते हैं तो इन्वायरमेंट के कंटेक्स्ट में पढ़ते हैं.
हाँ.
और हाँ, तो कितना मतलब इको फेमिनिज्म पे सर की स्टडी भी रही है. सर के साथ हमने बहुत सारी एग्जामिनेशन ड्यूटीज भी करी हैं दत्ताई के साथ, जब शुरू में सेंट्रल इवैल्यूएशन होता था.
अच्छा.
तो वी यूज्ड टू डिस्कस द लीगल इश्यूज. और सर का हमेशा से ओरिएंटेशन रहा है, झुकाव रहा है लॉ के प्रति. तो मुझे लिखा है सर भी अच्छी चॉइस हो सकते हैं सब्जेक्ट पे बोलने के लिए. और
नहीं, और he works in the field, this is the main thing. वो फील्ड पे काम ज्यादा करते हैं.
और मैडम दीपा का भी हॉर्टिकल्चर सब,
और इनके साथ तो ये she herself is a woman, she is a horticulturist, she is an agriculturist, and she is also chairing the internal complaint committee, so having the women issues also in mind. So a very good choice, very good choice of the panel, very good choice.
इस बोझ के तले दब न जाए.
No, ma'am, we are sure that you will definitely share some good.
मेरे ख्याल से जब भी चंद्रा जी ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं तुम इंट्रोडक्शन करा लो गेस्ट का.
Yes, I think
you can do that.
in the series, the next is our own Professor Deepa Dwivedi, ma'am. So before I would invite ma'am to share her views, now I invite Professor Shashi Kumar, the professor of our own Department of Human Rights, for introducing ma'am's academic and administrative achievement to all of us.
Thank you, Rashida, for giving this opportunity, introducing the women of substance in our university. This man told me that she is a very dynamic lady, having experience of vast in the agricultural science and the horticulture, other things. Before I introduce her, just let me also say that the contribution of women in the field of agriculture economy. We know India is a country of villages where the agriculture is the most economy, and women is contributing a lot. I recall the tribal women, they are in the forest there, but they are collecting collecting the forest products for feeding their family, and they're working hard than the men. Because man is just, I know that they are not working much than the women, but women are working, they're getting water from the well, from far-flung areas. And similarly, the Dalit women also, they suffer a lot in the village, but they are contributing a lot. They are working hard for feeding their family, for raising their kids. So कहीं ना कहीं जो है वुमन का रोल, जो ज़्यादातर जो पॉवर्टी में है, जो पुअर हैं, जो मार्जिनलाइज्ड हैं, उनकी ज़्यादा मैं कह सकता हूँ कि दे आर वर्किंग हार्ड, डबल दे आर बीइंग वर्किंग हार्ड, फैमिली के लिए भी और समाज के लिए भी. और जैसे कि आज का जो सब्जेक्ट है क्या बोलते हैं, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के लिए, तो वुमेन का कंट्रीब्यूशन काफ़ी ज़्यादा है. और इन्वायरमेंट के प्रोटेक्शन के लिए, जैसे कि मैम ने भी कहा कि वुमेन जो है ज़्यादा पूजा पाठ करती हैं इन कंपेयर टू मैन. सारी जो पूजा पाठ जो है वुमेन की हैं, जो है चाहे वो ट्री के लिए हो, जो ज़्यादातर देखा मैंने कि जो है ज़्यादातर वुमेन ही करती हैं पूजा पाठ, जो कि इन्वायरमेंट से रिलेटेड है. मैन का भी वहाँ पर कंट्रीब्यूशन कम है. सो कहीं ना कहीं वुमेन जो है इन्वायरमेंट फ्रेंडली ज़्यादा काम करती हैं, या फ्रेंडली से ज़्यादा रिलेटेड है. बट द जेंडर इक्वालिटी की जो बात हो रही है, जेंडर इक्वालिटी हमें अब इस समय आ गया है कि हम लोग दोनों जेंडर्स को एक जो है पैरिटी देखें, उनके कंट्रीब्यूशन को भी याद करें, और हम लोग एक समन्वय, एक बैलेंस बना के जो है इन्वायरमेंट को सेव करना है, प्रोटेक्ट करना है. तो इसी के कुछ शब्दों के साथ मैं आई इंट्रोड्यूस माय टुडेज आवर वुमेन स्पीकर. आई से शी इज Professor Deepa Dwivedi, and in Department of Horticulture, and she did her Bachelor of Degree from GVP Pantnagar, Master Degree from GVP same University, PhD from same University, GVPUAT Pant University, and she has qualified NET and other fellowship also she getting. She's been teaching since 21 years, and she has guided MSc 45 students, and around 8 students have been registered for PhD. I think maybe they are successfully completed. She had 2 projects, and she has publication of 65 in journals, and 20 paper presentations, 2 books, and 1 edited books. She is a member of many academic bodies, and she has been awarded many awarded honors. She has been life members of many professional societies also. The list and more. And she is also very active in our university governments. She is a person of the internal complaint committee, and perhaps she has done justice to the women issues also in our university. She is a member of the board of studies of horticulture, and importantly, she has visited many countries in the painting papers, like in Toronto in 2022, like Seoul, Korea, and Portugal, and Turkey. So I am very honored to invite her to deliver her.
Gaurav.
So I invite Deepa Dwivedi, ma'am. Please.
Before ma'am start, I would also like to mention that I also got opportunity to work with ma'am, and I know that ma'am is having a really vast experience, practical experience, as Saxena ma'am was saying. So we are really hoping that ma'am's deliberation on the topic would be really helpful. That would really add in our treasure of knowledge. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, I would like to specially thank Dr. Shashi Kumar. He has made me realize the immense responsibility that I have, being the only woman speaker on Women's Day, to talk about women issues, firstly. And secondly, sir, अगर हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी के कोई मेल काउंटरपार्ट्स कहते हैं that we have done justice to women issues in the university as chairperson. मैं नतमस्तक हूँ आपके सामने. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद for this acknowledgement. और मुझे लगता है that nothing could be further. So thank you very much for introducing me, sir. Thank you to the head of the department for giving me this opportunity to speak, to Professor Preeti Saxena, who has been a mentor, and we have a very long association. I am chairperson today, but a lot of my thoughts, a lot of my decisions are guided to a great extent by her experience and knowledge of law, which has, what should I say, carved my personality regarding this ICC, because I worked under her chairmanship also as member of ICC for a very long time. And we did some very tricky cases in our time before I became the chairperson. I know I cannot hold a candle to her experience and expertise, but even so. Now, I'm grateful that the organizers have given me an opportunity to speak about women issues vis-a-vis sustainable development. And I, being a horticulturist, I would automatically, by nature, focus more on the agricultural issues. However, I try and give my, view about what is the situation and the status of women in the world today. How empowered are we really? How recognized is our potential really? And how respected are we?
Ma'am, you are mute. Deepa, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have pressed a button somewhere.
No issue, ma'am.
I prepared a small presentation which I will like to present before you all now. Can I do that, Rashida, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll just start with the presentation, and I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, see? Yeah. Oh, no. I think we should go on to it.
You share the window, ma'am.
1 minute, ma'am. Yeah, can you see my screen, ma'am?
No, not yet, ma'am.
1 sec.
First, open the PPT on your screen and then share it.
We've done that, ma'am. I will. So a window, I think. पूरा screen आ रहा है.
No, you share the window only. You choose that option.
Right. I think I'll share the view, right.
Yeah.
नहीं आ रहा है भाई. Let me get on to the.
Is there someone to assist you, ma'am? Are you
Just a minute, ma'am. I'll just a minute, ma'am. I have my person here.
Okay. Or you send me, I will share it from here, if possible. मैम नहीं हो रहे तो आप प्रेजेंटेशन स्टार्ट कर दो.
आप म्यूट है मैम, म्यूट है आपका. Ma'am, you can also share your PPT as Misra ma'am saying to her, she will share.
फोटोग्राफ्स वगैरह होंगी ना हिमाद भी.
मैम आपके मेल आईडी पे मैं शेयर करती हूँ. In the meantime, if you like, you can ask Dr. Dutta to go ahead with it, with the presentation.
ओके ओके.
मैं आपको बस अभी भेजती हूँ मैम.
आप व्हाट्सएप कर दीजिए ऐसा करिए.
WhatsApp नहीं, I'll send it through this mail only.
Okay.
Okay, Rashida.
By the time these all things will be set down, now I invite our newly joined faculty, Mr. Dr. Rashvesh Shankhalji, to give a formal introduction of our own, a very learned speaker who is having a very vast practical experience, as everybody knows, who is Professor Venkatesh Dutta.
Thank you, Rashida ma'am. Thank you for this honor. On the behalf of the entire DHR, I formally introduce Professor Venkatesh Dutta, sir. He is Professor of Environmental Science at the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University. He has contributed to significant changes in public discourse, law and policy for sustainable development, resource management in India. His research interests span environmental management with particular emphasis on water policy, catchment planning, river restoration, and eco-hydrology. He had about 20 years of professional experience in areas of water quality management, land use planning, and environmental impact assessment. He has been actively working on water quality and ecosystem management of Gomti River, which is a tributary of Ganga, using catchment planning approach, integrating functional and ecological values of river systems and their significance in the built landscape. He served as a member of Drafting Committee of Science and Technology and Innovation Policy Framework 2020, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, and member Drafting Committee State Water Policy 2020, Government of Uttar Pradesh. He is a member of District Environmental Committee and District Ganga Committee, Namami Ganga, Ministry of Jal Shakti. He is also a Gomti River water keeper. And I was going through his CV and the amount of scholarship speaks volumes about his credentials, academic credentials. And I personally congratulate sir on his recent book from the Routledge, which has a title on water conflict and resistance issues and challenges in South Asia. Without further delay, I would like to formally invite Professor Venkatesh Dutta for his formal deliberation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for such a generous introduction. I hope I'm audible and
Yes, sir,
my
yes.
voice is clear. So I am very much thankful to the chairperson of this event and also the faculty of Department of Human Rights, particularly Professor Preeti Saxena madam and Professor Preeti Misra madam, for giving me a chance to speak on this occasion, particularly on the Women's Day, and also to reflect upon what we are doing and how it is touching upon the concept of feministic research methodology, or what I call the gender neutral research, what we do in our lab and how we connect back to the audience, to the the entire community. I say the epistemic community, the community of learners, the community of what you call the social construction. So I would be basically talking upon the feministic research method as part of learning and how it has evolved my journey as a scientist or as a grounded theorist. Once I did a course on research methodology almost like 1 decade back, and there were a series of lectures on feministic research methodology. And I realized that what I'm doing is nothing but the principles of feministic research. And people confuse that feminism is only about women. No, I think that it's a way of looking the world in a gender neutral perspective. It could be also talking about men in disaster. So how we as an ecologist construct feminism from the epistemic language, from the epistemic community. So I'll give you the example of my own experience of social construction versus logical positivism. I'll give you the instance of a survey that we did in Bangalore many years back. We were doing a survey on technology diffusion. There were one funder who had invested on launching a probe that will examine the soil moisture in the farmer's field. So we were going to deploy that instruments in rural outskirts of Bangalore towards Anikal, the Ganganhalli pockets in Karnataka. And we realized that the farmers were not interested. Like after every week, we used to go to take the record from the logger, and the machines were dismantled and some were stolen. So we went back to the villagers and we talked to the community, and they said, look, you are trying to impose a technology which is not needed here. Our soil is productive. We are getting 3 crops in a year. Why do I need a machine to examine the soil moisture? We grow groundnut, we have cotton, we have so many vegetables. And in this village, there are no legal conflicts. Not a single legal case is going on. So we were quite disappointed. Like, this is a perfect village, nothing is required, people are happy. So, but some of our researchers, they tried to talk to the women of that village. And later we realized that we have to take departure, we have to go beyond the construct of logical positivism, where we think that everything works in the field and we set the hypothesis and then we go into the field. When we talk to the women, we realized that there were undercurrent conflicts going on, and that was due to opening of the modern, what you call the modern liquor shops just outside the city limit, where male would go and come in the evening and they would beat their wives. A lot of conflicts were there, but they were not talked about. So we went to examine the case of diffusion of a product, of a typical technological product, but we came with a different sort of learning, and that learning threw light on social construction, the reality that we look, from an angle of the other gender that we call. I would also cite the example of Preeti Misra madam, Preeti Saxena madam was talking about the Chipko movement, particularly about Gaura Devi and all the women who were part of this watershed event in our ecological history. I'll also shed some light how this event became a war against the ruling government to frame forest policy. And then I would also try to reflect upon the case of environmental pollution and disasters and how it affects differentially the females, the women. We only go with a perspective that it will affect, it will affect similarly to all the gender. But there are differential impacts of environmental pollution. There are differential impacts of disasters. When you go to a drought-prone area or a flood-prone area, you would see that it is the female folks who bear the most of the burden of the disaster. So traditionally, if you see in the literature, women have been portrayed as they are quite sensitive and responsive to ecological problems. And the relationship of women and the earth, they have been seen as foundational, as very primitive in its analysis and practice. And the concept of ecofeminism, when you examine the very concept of ecofeminism, it calls for a very egalitarian, a sort of collaborative society where there is no one dominant group. So when we teach ecology, we also teach that ecology does not respect dominism. It is like you have to go away from that sort of paternalistic or patriarchal value, because ecology is sort of considered in our traditional parlance as Mother Earth or Mother Nature, like a nurturer, like a caregiver, but it has also led to a very harmful split between nature and culture, between the operation of the male dominant forces. And when we talk about the male dominant force, we mean the over extraction of resource like pollution, over extraction of groundwater, river water, and all sorts of capitalism that is reflecting upon those patriarchal values. So coming back to the feministic research, we have to understand the difference between the method, methodology, and epistemology. These are three different terms, and feminist research is not a method. It is a methodology. It is epistemology. You know, when you talk about method, method could be a research technique or research practice, whereas methodology is theory of how that research is going to be conducted, and epistemology is that theory of knowledge. So when you apply ecofeminism in the traditional in lab setting, where we are sought to be neutral to the what we call hypothesis. When we set the hypothesis, we have null and alternate. But as a grounded theorist, and certainly not a logical positivist, we are basically rooted in feministic research methodology. So I myself, when I had to define myself, I would say that I am a grounded theorist rooted in feminism, rooted in feministic research methodology, because feminism is all inclusive, just like ecology is all inclusive. It respects heterogeneity, it respects equity, and it doesn't like supremacy, right? So feminism and ecology, they are just like going together, and all feministic researchers, like we have the epistemic, I was talking about the epistemic community, they are connected knowers. We call them connected knowers, because in just like an ecosystem, you have all the connections, all the components are linked with each other. But when we see the dominant force, the over dominance, like damming of a river or the excessive abstraction of water, it displays power, it displays supremacy. And when I was doing a river journey, I started traveling along a river to understand a river way back in 2011. And I came with a principle called Nadi Sutra, 14 Principles of River Management. And I also gave this concept of Nadi Sanskriti. And in that Nadi Sanskriti, Nari Sanskriti was coming very prominently. And this reflection came from this concept of cleaning of the river. We saw that every monsoon, during the peak monsoon, the river would cleanse herself within the 14 days period. So there was a periodicity of cleaning, or the periodicity of renewal in the ecological systems. For example, the cleaning of the river with the flushing flows of the river, that itself was the self-cleansing mechanism. So in this background, I would say that the traditional method in the academic literature was all about gauging the experience of women in natural social settings. And the aim was to make women visible, to raise their awareness and consciousness, and empower them also. But as I gave you this example, how we have to move beyond this very construct of logical positivism and go to more social construction of reality, and see from the angle of the feministic theory. So feminism is not about study of women. I again say feminist is about gender justice goals. Feminism is not about just the other gender. It is about how knowledge is socially constructed, because we cannot ignore, and we must not ignore the heterogeneity in the society. Now, coming back to this ecological movement of Chipko, we have to understand that it was people's ecological movement. What Gaura Devi and Lata and the Mrs. Bahuguna, what they did. So we have to understand the history of Chipko movement, where the women, they stood up for the trees against the contractors. And this was also linked with the anti-dam movement. You know, Tehri Dam was also being planned, and women of that region were real strength of the movement. Although it was not talked about, Sundarlal Bahugunaji and Chandi Prasad Bhatt, they were leading in two different quarters. But when you see that the history of this movement, it started way back in early 50s. Women literally hugged trees, and they interposed their bodies between the trees and the loggers, you know, to prevent the trees being cut. And they defended their ecological rights. They defended the supremacy, the dominance of the forces who were all set up to destroy the ecological heritage of that the Chamoli and Tehri Garhwal Himalayas. So the Gandhian movement, which led to Sarvodaya and the non-violent resistance, they were all started by the women, whether it is Gaura Devi or Bimla Bahuguna or Lata. So we had many such examples. And this event, it is just like a blaze of fire, a blaze of trail. It just moved from Gopeshwar to Valley of Flowers to Josimath and even to other states. But behind the scene, if you examine it carefully, the women were fighting two wars, two undercurrent conflicts. One against the very men who were against their participation, right? So Chipko movement is very much a feminist movement, but it is also a social movement that was resisting a change. And that change was to respect the indigenous people, not just female, not just the other gender, but respecting the indigenous culture, indigenous people, the forest rights in the Himalayas. And it led to the formulation of forest policy. So the female were also trying to raise war against this forest policy also, because ultimately indigenous communities were left out. So coming back to this construct, the ecofeminism, we have to see that does our method accurately capture the social reality? Like we are, when we tell our researchers to do review of literature, we are trying to put them into a frame. And we are just like, we are putting them into doctorization of review of literature. Basically, when the method itself is a construct of reality, it is more grounded, it is more feministic. And that is why I call feminism is not about women, it is about the gender justice goals. So one more example that I wanted to give was about the disaster, the victims of environmental disaster, especially floods and droughts. We all study the impacts of floods and droughts, but do we study the differential impacts on women? If you go and examine the case of drought in Bundelkhand, all the men, they would migrate to cities and they would leave behind the women. And they would be solely in charge of cultivation. They would be in charge of their livestock, the children. There would be cases of conflicts, depression, and there would be feeling of being outcast. But traditional researchers, as a logical positivist, I would just go and do a survey, do an empirical research, and would fail to empirically examine this sort of reality, this sort of construct. So empirical methods, they are not necessary, they are not always political. They could be also gender neutral. They could be value free, and they could also highlight these sort of gaps in the literature about how to seek or how to reveal and overcome sort of endocentric biases in research. I call it endocentric bias because they do not seek to create a social change. They do not seek to represent human diversity. So we must acknowledge that positionality of a researcher, whether it is a male or female, and also respect that the women, and not just men alone, they are the participants. And their experiences, their social hierarchies, they matter a lot. The entire social construct matter a lot. And one example is the ethnography that I always quote, the participatory research, the action research, where feminism talks about respecting human and cultural diversity, where feminism talks about revealing and embracing diversity of social experience, about the heterogeneity, just like ecological principles, where there is no respect for dominance, there is respect for there is respect for egalitarian society. So I would try to sum it here. I will not go into detail, but I would give you just one example. When we were framing the innovation technology framework, I was just worried about why we make machines only for men when there are cultivators like female. They are not acknowledged. When you see the paddy being cultivated, the initial planting of paddy saplings, the female, they would be in the water, muddy water, for 8 to 9 hours, backward bend. Try doing that in your home. Imagine when you have a bowl of rice, how much pain somebody has gone to cultivate that paddy. But from the lens of researcher, when we go and examine sort of this sort of divide, the digital divide or the gender divide or technology divide, we never talk about this sort of the patriarchal gaps or the over dominance of the Purush or over Prakriti. So even that very concept of Prakriti and Purush is quite keen to this sort of feministic research methodology, where the over dominance has to be subdued. Just like in ecology, it doesn't like homogeneity, it doesn't like monoculture, it likes the entire heterogeneous habitat, the cohabitat or co-living principles, co-sharing of knowledge, co-sharing of learning. So I would end it here with one example. When I completed this course in research methodology, a refresher course, so I started viewing myself as a grounded theorist who is rooted in feministic research methodologies. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak, and I extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizer and to all present here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh Dutta, for such an enlightenment, and I hope that everyone who is listening over here would feel the feeling of and feel the pain also, which you want to translate in your words, and will understand why gender parity and gender equality is very important aspect in the modern time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dattaji. Thank you so much. Here, I would also like to share that one of my research scholar, Shivpriya, she is doing research on effect of climate change on women. And I sent her to him for the guidance, and he has really provided very rich input to her. And I think this year's International Women's Day theme is also going to benefit her a lot if she's here throughout the session listening to all the speakers. So thank you, Dattaji. Thank you so much for giving your time.
Thank you, sir. I also want to thank you by quoting your own statement that feminism and ecology goes together. So there is a need to make the system women friendly too, along with the eco-friendly. So the over dominance of men can be subdued. So thank you very, very much, sir, for your very
nice presentation, Dr. Datta.
Very enlightening lecture on the theme. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now I'm hoping that all the problem is solved from the end of Professor Deepa Dwivedi, ma'am.
Gigi, I'm also hoping, because I think once in between I was able to flash my presentation to you all. Number 5 once again.
Okay, ma'am. It was there, yeah. Then
yeah,
it was
I'll just get through. So I say this, then I share. Can you see my screen now?
No. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, coming. Yes, it is there. Yes, it is there. I have pinned it on the screen. Yeah.
Are we able to move forward?
You click on the slide only, then it will move. Yeah.
स्लाइड पे भी कर रही हूँ तो भी नहीं आ रहा है. Okay. So I'm sorry I'm not able to give it to you as a full screen, but I'm sure all of you can see what I am trying to show to you all.
Yes, ma'am, it is
So
visible.
my presentation I have entitled "Are Women the Pivot of Sustainable Development?" और मैंने प्रश्नवाचक इसको चिन्ह नहीं लगाया है क्योंकि मैं इसी ऊहापोह में थी कि my belief is that women are the pivot of sustainable development. लेकिन अभी तक डिबेट हो रहा है that are women the pivot of sustainable development? We are sitting on, we are celebrating Women's Days, we are talking about feminism, we are talking about women empowerment. I don't really like to call it feminism. I'd much rather title it as women empowerment. So, इसीलिए मैंने प्रश्नवाचक चिन्ह नहीं लगाया है. Now, what is development really? Dr. R.P. Singh, right in the beginning, said development is not just economic. There are three pillars to development. जिसमें से एक है economic, दूसरा है environmental development. Also, you talk about environmental sustainability, etc. And the third is social development. And let me tell you that there are n number of studies which today have established that unless there is social development, and in this social development, if there is development of the woman, it is only then that actual development is supposedly taking place in any country, in any environment. Right? Now, we move a step forward and we talk about sustainable development. Now, what is this term sustainable development? हम जब सस्टेनेबल की बात करते हैं तो वो एक आइडिया देता है निरंतरता की. जो हमने एक बार किया है उसको यदि हम निरंतर कर पाएं, then it is called sustainable development. If I take an example from agriculture, तो धान का रोपण, जैसा कि अभी डॉक्टर दत्ता ने कहा, धान का रोपण हम खेत में करते हैं और धान उगाते हैं और उसकी हमको एक बम्पर उपज मिल पाती है, बम्पर ईल्ड मिलता है, बम्पर हार्वेस्ट मिलता है. परंतु ये अगर हम हर साल कर पाए रिपीटेडली, then it is sustainability. Otherwise, it is just production of paddy in one particular year. So what we are talking about is a model which is able to meet the needs of the present without compromising the resources for the future generations. Only then we are going to be having sustainable development. Now, this development can be in any terms. So this is something that we have to keep in mind. We should not have policies where we use up our fossil fuels for development of a particular country in a limited time. But we should have policies where we are able to utilize fuel or power for development through the ages, right? So this is what sustainability would be. And this is possible only through judicious use of the natural resources. Secondly, by using processes which are not degradative. They do not degrade, they build, or they use judiciously. Then we talk about models which are repeatable or they are sustained. There was a Norwegian prime minister who drafted the first policy of sustainable development, and her statement was, don't take more than your share. So if each one of us do not take more than our share, then the development that will come across is going to be sustainable. It is going to carry on for many, many, many years to come. Now, one very important point that studies have highlighted is that gender equity is perhaps the missing link of sustainable development. Now, if you talk about economic development, there is a study which says that in the corporate sector, women are very poorly represented. Professor R.P. Singh mentioned that there is a lot of student participation, and the women or the girl students, their number is increasing with every subsequent year. Every subsequent admission, we find that there is a greater representation of girl students. But my concern is that these students, after studying, how much are they able to find an expression of for all that they have studied in society, in terms of jobs, in terms of employment? How much are they able to take forward whatever they have earned in terms of academic proficiency? If you look at the corporate sector, you will find that it is only 3% of the CEOs across the globe who are women. It is just 6% who are the top managers. And it is just 15% of the top companies. It is just 15% women who are representing as board members in the lucrative corporate sector, in the lucrative companies across the world. So what is important is to realize that we are sitting on a triangle, and our representation in the economic sector is progressively decreasing. Do you not feel that this is more frustrating for the girl students who are spending as much time in their academic pursuit as the boys, yet their representation on the economic front is progressively decreasing as you move towards the top? Even if you look at the academic institutions, you will find a similar expression. You will not find very many women vice-chancellors across our own country, if we were to look at it. If you look at the political scenario, you will not find very many women premiers of countries. So this is a question which needs to be answered. So gender equity is required on the economic front, and is we can see that the expression is very poor. Now, when we talk about social development, there are certain social indicators which need to be looked at in order that there can be social development. And these indicators are the income equity. Both genders or people are able to earn equally. Secondly, the employment opportunities. There should be an equal employment opportunity to each gender. There should be no discrimination on the social front, not just talking about gender, but caste, creed, religion, color, gender, so many things which have been mentioned in our lectures previously. And lastly, gender equality. If there is discrimination of gender, there can never be any social development in countries. And there has been a study which says that Dr. Rakesh Chandra had said that national income is not contiguous with women development. But one study has stated that a country's development definitely influences the development of women, but it is the development of women which is responsible for the development of a country. In other words, supposing we do not pay attention towards the development of the women, towards their empowerment, whether it is in the education sector, whether it is health, whether it is, anything, then such countries have found to stagnate as far as economic development is concerned. And perhaps the United States of America was mentioned as an example where they say that the stagnating economy perhaps is greatly being referred to in terms of the women development in that country. I was amazed when I read this too. Now, talking about environmental development, women are the most affected by climate change. Why? I am not saying they are most affected as in they are facing the repercussions of climate change. Each one of us is facing the repercussions of climate change, but they perhaps are more sensitive towards climate change. So women have been found to be more eco-sensitive, and along with that, they have been found to be more eco-sensible also. They think very sensibly when it comes to the utilization of natural resources, and that is why they are perhaps eco-sensible, and that is why we call them eco-sensitive. You will not find men talking about recycling, but you will always find women saying ki, oh, is polythene ko rakh lo, we'll use it for another time. When we go and buy vegetables, we'll carry this polythene with us. So let us save it. We will always recycle our resources. So this is, you will find women carpooling, perhaps to a greater extent as compared to men. It has also been established that women are using sustainable strategies in their day-to-day works. So therefore, we believe that the women are more eco-sensitive and also more eco-sensible. Now, coming to the women in agriculture, this is being a horticulturist. Let us view what is the situation of women in agriculture. Women basically, agriculture basically is of three kinds. One is the rural agriculture, which is in the villages. There is the peri-urban agriculture, which is on the boundaries from the rural to the urban sectors. And then, of course, there is the urban agriculture. We are today talking about terrace gardening. We are talking about vertical farming. We are talking about growing vegetables in our balconies. This is all a form of urban agriculture. And women are involved in each of these three kinds of agricultural activities. And their contribution is extremely pronounced. Now, women are important, and even in the agriculture sector, they are important. Their importance has been recognized even by the United Nations, because the United Nations declared 15th of October as the International Day of the Rural Women. And India, subsequently, we declared 15th of October as the National Women Farmers Day in the year 2018. So it's not that our governments do not, our policy makers do not realize the importance of women. They do recognize it and they do acknowledge it. But somewhere down the road, kahin kuch gadbad ho jata hai, and women are lost, where they do not get a forum to express themselves. That is the sad scenario. Now, women are very actively, as far as agriculture is concerned, women are very actively involved in activities like interculture, निराई, गुड़ाई. इन सब चीजों में आप पाएंगे कि महिलाएं काम करती हैं. प्रोपगेशन, पौधे को प्रवर्धित करना, एक पौधे से 10 बनाना, whether it is through sowing of seeds, whether it is through the other vegetative means of propagation. But the major nursery industry in our country and also abroad is employing women workers. I'd like to quote Dr. Saxena over here, that it is the nature of women to be close to nature. It is their nimble fingers which help them achieve propagation and multiplication. It is their sensitivity and their basic nature to nurture that they are involved in nursery raising. Transplanting activities, Dr. Dutta ने बताया, जब हम धान की रोपाई करते हैं तो मुख्य रूप से महिलाएं करती हैं धान की रोपाई. आप चाहे असम चले जाइए, चाहे बंगाल में देखिए, चाहे आप उत्तर प्रदेश में देख लीजिए, चाहे दक्षिण भारत चले जाइए. But it is women who are primarily involved. But it is not because it is only the women who can do transplanting. You will find men working shoulder to shoulder in the paddy fields and doing the transplanting. But the sad truth is that it is women who are allocated the job of transplanting, क्योंकि इसको एक इतना lucrative prospect नहीं माना गया है और transplanting के job पर कहते हैं कि महिलाओं से करा लिया जाए. पुरुष ऐसा मानते हैं कि we need to give our contribution towards the more lucrative part of agriculture, which involves marketing, which involves negotiation of prices and so on and so forth. So this is what is the important part. Also, women are very actively involved in harvesting. Also, the allied fields in agriculture like processing, चाहे वो अचार बनाना है, चाहे वो होली के लिए आपके पापड़ सुखाना है, आलू के चिप्स बनाना है, ये सारी चीजें processing और preservation की field में you will find that it is the women who are actively involved. They are doing processing and preservation at the home level, in their own houses, but they have till today not been able to take it up as an industry. आम के अचार बनाने की इंडस्ट्री अभी भी नहीं एस्टैब्लिश हुई है जिसको कि कोई एक वुमन हेड कर रही है. उस अचार बनाने की फैक्ट्री में women workers कार्यरत हैं बनाने में, but it is not the woman who is the CEO, it is not the woman who is the managing director of the company, is what my contention is. Also, dairy, fish farming, poultry, all these activities are done by the women, and along with this, they do the housework, they have childcare, they have cooking, they have washing, they have listening to their children, wiping their tears, etc., 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 which are their additional duties. So therefore, women are important, but they are allocated the more menial jobs of agriculture, which give them a lower remuneration. एक पुरुष की जो daily wage है आज की डेट में, and I'm talking about Lucknow, I'm talking about the peri-urban areas of Lucknow, एक एग्रीकल्चर वर्कर को मिनिमम टू मिनिमम 300 रुपए का डेली वेज है. और वही जो एक महिला आती है काम करने, जो कि 8 घंटे काम करके जाएगी, उसकी वेज मुश्किल से 120 रुपए या 150 रुपए है. And this I talk from experience. So this is the discrimination which is coming in, and this is very pronounced. This is something which needs to be overcome. Another very important thing is that there are two kinds of agricultural activities where women are involved. One is where the women are the cultivators. That means where they have ownership of land also. And there is one where they are coming in as the agricultural labor. And let me tell you that it is a large fraction of the women population that is the agricultural labor, the landless labor. It is very few who are the women cultivators. So not very many women have their name in the papers, the land papers. जो land के documents होते हैं, उसमें it is not the woman. Right? Women are contributing to agriculture more in the form of the agriculture labor rather than the cultivator. Now, what is the representation of women? So 60 to 80% of the agricultural activities in agriculture are looked after by women. I went to Arunachal Pradesh. Mandua Ragi was being transplanted in Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang. And down the hill, I saw it was the women who were involved in this activity, even in a far-flung place like Tawang. Now, 90% of the dairy activities are done by women. वो dairy farms के जो उनके होते हैं, it is cleaned by the women, milking is done by the women, the animals are tended to by the women. So most of the dairy activities are done by the women, and more than 30% of the 118.7 million cultivators, I will not call them cultivators, but women involved in what you call agriculture. There are more than 30% of so many cultivators who are women. All right, but are they visible? Are they visible? Is anybody looking at them? Are there any policies for such landless laborers? Are there any policies for such cultivators? Are there any policies for such women cultivators who have become cultivators by force because of the male migration, like Dr. Dutta was saying? Once there is any kind of natural disaster like a famine or anything, the male population moves out towards greener pastures and leaves the women behind to till the land, to do agriculture, to cultivate the land. So, are there any policies of this kind for such women? So, what are the challenges that women are facing in agriculture? Ownership of land, like I said, there are hardly 14% of women across the world, I would say, not just India, who have any ownership of land. Because of the traditional systems, because of the patriarchal societies existing in most civilizations, it is just perhaps 14% of the women who have any ownership of land. If you look at the credit facilities, women cultivators or the women agriculture workers cannot offer any, they cannot have any collateral security. The male members, because of their more lucrative professions, are considered collateral security, but women do not qualify anywhere. Landholding, supposing there are women cultivators, the land holdings which are in the names of such women are very marginal. They are the small land holdings. These are the marginal land holdings, but not the larger land holdings. This is again because of the inequality which exists in society, and more in the rural societies where the agrarian population exists. If you look at the training, the technology, the technique, the skill enhancement, it has been concentrated on the men till now. There are very few women who have been trained formally. Whatever training they have is what has been passed down to them from their elders. But they have no formal training. There are no policies where you are training women in any skill or in any technology. So this is a very important point. This needs to be focused upon. Pay, I have already mentioned this point. Market access, you will not find women moving to the markets for selling their produce. It is the male of the society which is moving. Why? Why is that so? In such an empowered society as today, why should there be this kind of an system which still exists? As far as resources are concerned, even the decision making of whether we are going to be growing paddy or whether we are going to be doing any other crop, what is the crop rotation we are going to be following, does not rest with the woman. It rests with the male of that particular, this thing. So this is something that we need to be sensitive towards. We need to understand that these are the major issues which need to be looked upon. We talk about capacity building. We talk about awareness. We talk about recognizing the contribution of women. This is extremely important for increasing the self-respect of women. It is time that we broke the fetters of glorification. Don't make us Durga. Don't glorify us as the best mother, the best friend, the best whatever. Look at us like a normal human being. Forget that we are women. Take us as a human being. Then we are empowered. Then we are equal. So this is very important. जब वो दिन आएगा जब हम लोग इक्वालिटी ढूंढना और मांगना छोड़ेंगे, वो दिन होगा जब एक महिला एक पुरुष के बराबर या समकक्ष मानी जाएगी, उसके पहले तक ये सिर्फ बातें हैं, nothing beyond that. So this is something that we need to understand. Thank you very much. This is all that I would like to say. Before I close, I would mention that in today's time, policies are definitely changing. The presence of the internal complaints committees in institutions is one such example, where policies, government policies are changing. Today, there is an act against sexual harassment. There is an act for the prevention of sexual harassment, and it is a very strong law which is existing, which is for the empowerment of women. We as women need to know what this act is, what is the internal complaints committee, what are our rights, which the policy makers have tried to give to us to help empower us. So the future is not really bleak. Very, very soon, I think, as women, we would be equal, and it would be a sustainable equality, which would lead towards a sustainable development. And with this, I'd like to close my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Deepa Dwivedi ji. Thank you so much for such a nice exposition and presentation. I hope that all the participants must have benefited out of all the all the lectures that have been delivered by the academicians par excellence, whether it was Professor Rakesh Chandra ji from University of Lucknow, Professor Venkatesh Dutta, our own friend and colleague, and from BBAU, from the Department of Environmental Science, and Deepa Dwivedi ji, professor from the Department of Horticulture. So I'm sure that all the participants must have benefited from this lecture, and the research scholars especially who are working on the women issues and relating to environment, etc. So with this, now I invite for a formal vote of thanks, Ajay Kumar Kushwaha ji, our faculty from the Department of Human Rights, to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Very crisp presentation, Dr. Deepa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
नारी अंकुर बीज धरा था, नारी धरा स्वरूप, नारी जग का सृजन करे इसके अनुकूल रूप। आप सभी को अंतर्राष्ट्रीय महिला दिवस के अवसर पर बहुत बहुत बधाई, हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। क्योंकि सृष्टि, प्रकृति और स्त्री दोनों ही सृजन का स्वरूप है, इसके बिना जीव और जीवन की कल्पना नहीं की जा सकती है। कैसे कर दूं आभार में उसका, जो माँ है, बहन है, पत्नी है, बेटी है और गुरु भी है, जिसने हमें संपूर्ण किया। एक साधारण सी दिखने वाली असाधारण सी नारी को जो सृजन भी है और समापन भी, जो कि आभार की एक परिपाटी है, और इसको पूर्ण करने के लिए मैं इस अवसर पर आभार व्यक्त करने के लिए यहाँ उपस्थित हुआ। इस एक दिवसीय वेबिनार का आयोजन अंतर्राष्ट्रीय महिला दिवस के अवसर पर विषय एक स्थायी कल के लिए आज एक लैंगिक समानता के अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर रखा गया है। आभार व्यक्त करने के इस महत्वपूर्ण अवसर पर हम सर्वप्रथम आभारी हैं हमारे माननीय कुलपति महोदय आदरणीय आचार्य संजय सिंह सर के, आपकी सहज स्वीकृति से ये वेबिनार अपने सफल आयोजन की ओर अग्रसर है। माननीय सर प्रशासनिक कार्य की व्यस्तता के कारण आज हम लोगों के बीच उपस्थित इस वेबिनार में उपस्थित नहीं है, परंतु आपके प्रतिनिधि के रूप में हमारे विश्वविद्यालय परिवार के वरिष्ठ आचार्य आदरणीय राणा प्रताप सिंह सर, संकाय अध्यक्ष शैक्षणिक संकाय BBAU लखनऊ, हम आभार व्यक्त करते हैं सर आपका। सर आपकी सहज उपस्थिति निश्चित ही हमारा उत्साहवर्धन करती है। किसी भी कार्यक्रम की सफलता उसके विद्वान अतिथियों और वक्ताओं की उपस्थिति और उनके वक्तव्य पर निर्भर करती है। इसी कड़ी में हम आभारी हैं हमारे आज के मुख्य अतिथि महोदय आचार्य राकेश चंद्रा सर के, दर्शन शास्त्र विभाग लखनऊ विश्वविद्यालय लखनऊ के, आपकी गरिमामय उपस्थिति से हम और हमारा विश्वविद्यालय परिवार आपके प्रति आभार व्यक्त करता है सर। हम आभारी हैं हमारे विश्वविद्यालय परिवार की सदस्य के रूप में, महिला सशक्तिकरण की प्रतीक के स्वरूप में हमारे विश्वविद्यालय हमारे बीच उपस्थित मुख्य वक्ता के रूप में आचार्य दीपा द्विवेदी मैम के बागवानी विभाग SLS की अध्यक्ष ITC BBAU लखनऊ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय महिला दिवस के अवसर पर लैंगिक समानता के विषय पर आपका वक्तव्य हमारे एवं हमारे विद्यार्थियों के लिए अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण रहा। हम आभारी हैं हमारे विश्वविद्यालय परिवार के सदस्य के रूप में आचार्य वेंकटेश दत्ता सर का पर्यावरण विज्ञान अर्थ एवं पर्यावरण विज्ञान BBAU लखनऊ। आदरणीय सर, आपका अद्भुत वक्तव्य और विषय प्रतिपादन की शैली आज के महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर एक प्रभावशीलता बनाए रखती है। हम आभारी हैं विभाग की महिला सशक्तिकरण की प्रतीक आदरणीय संरक्षिका आचार्य प्रीति साक्सेना मैम के निर्देशक CPGLS BBAU लखनऊ। हम आभारी हैं अपने विभाग की संकाय अध्यक्ष एवं विभागाध्यक्ष आदरणीय प्रीति मिश्रा मैम के। मैम, आप दोनों की उपस्थिति महिला सशक्तिकरण के प्रतीक के रूप में एक आदर्श विषय वस्तु का प्रतिपादन करती है और हम आभारी हैं आप दोनों के की उपस्थिति से सदैव ये विभाग गौरवान्वित महसूस करेगा। हम आभारी हैं आज के वेबिनार के संयोजक हमारे विभाग के वरिष्ठ आचार्य आदरणीय शशि कुमार सर का। आपके सतत सहयोग से हमारे लिए एक ऊर्जा का कार्य करता है। हम आभारी हैं महिला सशक्तिकरण की प्रतीक एवं आज के वेबिनार के आयोजन की सचिव एवं वेबिनार की सूत्रधार डॉक्टर राशिदा अजहर मैडम के आपके कुशल आयोजन क्षमता के रूप में यह वेबिनार सफलता की ओर अग्रसर है। हम आभारी हैं वेबिनार के सह आयोजन सचिव हमारे विभाग के सह आचार्य डॉक्टर राजश्री सर का। सर, आपकी उपस्थिति और हमारे विद्यार्थियों के लिए एक नई ऊर्जा का संचार करती है। हम आभारी हैं हमारे विभाग परिवार के सदस्य डॉक्टर विजय भास्कर सर के। हम आभारी हैं हमारे विभाग के अन्य सहयोगियों कामरुद्दीन जी, सतगुरु जी, हतीब जी के, जिनके सहयोग से हम आज इस सेमिनार को पूर्णता की ओर अग्रसर हैं। हम आभारी हैं इस कार्यक्रम की सफलता में प्रत्येक अप्रत्यक्ष रूप से सहयोग करने वाले प्रत्येक व्यक्तियों का। अतः अंत में आदरणीय राणा प्रताप सिंह सर की अनुमति से मैं इस एक दिवसीय वेबिनार की समाप्ति की घोषणा करता हूँ। धन्यवाद, आभार।
धन्यवाद अजय कुमार कुशवाहा जी, आपको पूरी ऑर्गेनाइजिंग टीम की तरफ से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। I personally thank all the participants, all my guests, and not only from Lucknow, but I have seen that participants are from Punjab, from Himachal, from Assam, from Jharkhand, from Madhya Pradesh. It has really been a very, very fruitful and successful national webinar on the International Women's Day. I thank you all. Thank you so much. Now this is Preeti signing off from here. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.